the complete northern area now, the Ukrainians have re-established the border. So the border with Belarus and actually the northern border with Russia is now back to the way it was before, with border guards and everything else. And it looks pretty solid. That almost all the troops that were in Belarus have now moved round to the northeast, either towards facing Kharkiv or further down, facing the troops in Donbass. So working our way round from the top, Sumy is being bombarded, Kharkiv is being bombarded, and there are a large amount of Russian troops sitting outside of Kharkiv, supposedly waiting to come in. I heard that there were 25 battle groups, which is really a lot. But Kharkiv is actually quite strongly held by territorial troops, although they haven't got that much artillery in support. So one hopes that the Russians don't go for heavy bombardment as they've been doing everywhere else. Moving further south, but below Kharkiv, the troops have moved from Kharkiv down to Izium, which is sort of 50-70 kilometer trip down, and they're trying to cut off the troops that are at the top part of the Donbass line, the old trench lines. So there's actually work from the south of that, a part of that, and from the north of that. What's worrying is that there is a very steady movement forward of the Russian troops. They've changed their tactics completely. They're now going back to the old ways of fighting. So instead of having 3 battalion groups, they're pulling them together into brigades and divisions and putting them close together. So they're forming a much stronger phalanx of enemy to fight. But the infantry are waiting until the ground has been heavily prepared by artillery, which is what they were not doing previously. So this is back to the old days. Now, in that northeast area, now we have the chief of defense, Gerasimov, who is probably being punished by being sent to Izium to make sure that the breakthrough occurs. So this is going to be interesting times to see whether his presence actually makes things better or worse around Izium. But it is worrying, and what is particularly worrying is that the troops are running. Ukrainian troops are running low on artillery ammunition, and in some cases even other ammunition natures. But the NATO equipment is not going to arrive yet. So there's a holding on period, and it may well be that they get pushed back. It could even be that there is a breakthrough there. Although knowing the stubbornness of the Ukrainian troops, they're going to stand and fight to the last Ukrainian and the last bullet. Going down further, the old trench lines are holding. There are 1 or 2 minor breakthroughs on them, but pretty much there's a couple of 100 kilometers there of defense that is holding quite strongly. So, but it's being really, really heavily attacked again by artillery first, and especially by rocket launchers in these areas. So there's a lot of multi-barrel rocket launcher fire, which of course does get down into the trenches because it's because of the way that it actually is. So there we have that. Now below that, Mariupol is in. I can only describe it as in shit state. It's dire. The boys are hanging on, and they're hanging on inside the old ironworks as best as they can. It's a huge area. It's like 4 square miles of ironworks. It's not a small place, and it's riddled with tunnels underneath. But the Russians are just dropping the biggest bombs they can on top of it. So today they dropped a serious bomb on one area, which collapsed the roof and collapsed right down and has caused casualties. It's not sure how many, but it's it is apparently quite a lot of new deaths and new, and to use the expression they use, re-injured people. So people who were injured before are now injured even more. Now this is, I mean, if you talk about war crimes, this is probably the worst that you can think of, because it's basically just bombing innocent civilians in most of this, and you can't actually get any nastier than that as a race of human beings. Well, they're not human beings, as a race of animals who are just bombing human beings for the sheer joy of killing. This is like a bear or a fox just killing something for the sake of it. Moving further down the coast, they're holding everything along the south coast north of Crimea. But what they're doing here is, it's not so much that they're pushing forward, which they are, but slowly. It's what they're doing behind. They're terrorizing the population. They're terrorizing them by taking prisoners, by kidnapping children and sending women to the front line to spy for them, by torturing people, and of course by the normal things of rape and murder. So the aim there is to bring this whole area from Nikolaev across under Russian control, to make it not part of the old Donbass area, but even a separate enclave in itself. And people are fighting back a little bit, but it's really, really difficult, because this area was not armed before. There was no territorial defense organized before the Russians actually came in. And despite the fact that there are people who actually want to go down there and do sort of territorial defense and partisan work, the army doesn't seem to be showing much enthusiasm for that. But we know that people can get through, because someone has just walked with their dog all the way from Mariupol out. So it is possible to go through all the villages down there and actually get in and out of places. Nikolaev is under daily pressure, but it's the stopping block point for Odessa. So they've got to get past Nikolaev to actually get down to Odessa, and Nikolaev is holding quite strongly at the moment. North of Nikolaev, the Ukrainians have been trying to push back to Kherson, but the progress has been extremely slow, almost glacial. But they are saying all the time that they are moving forward. So Kherson is still, 20 kilometers away from the front line. So it's within sort of shelling range for Ukraine. But obviously Ukraine does not want to shell anything in Kherson, because it's full of people. So that actually sort of handcuffs the Ukrainians, because they're fighting now with one hand behind their back. Going past Odessa, we have the Moldova and Transnistria. And Transnistria is now on war alert, which means that Moldova is now on war alert. The Transnistrian army, depending upon who you talk to, ranges anything from 8,000 to 2,000, but they've not been fighting anywhere ever. So this is hardly going to be the Brigade Guards come pouring out of Transnistria, if indeed they are forced to fight by Russia. My suspicion is that a lot of Transnistrians are not going to want to fight at all, the ones in the army, because they're untrained and they know that they're going to get killed. The one from Odessa towards Romania, there is also an estuary, and there's a bridge over the estuary, and that bridge has been shelled a couple of times and damaged, which gave rise to the thought that the piece of Ukraine on the other side of the estuary that Russia might try to capture that. They could do that by bringing in troops close on the Black Sea to Romania and putting them into that area, or even perhaps coming out from Transnistria into that area. But to do that, that means that the bridge has got to be destroyed, and it hasn't been yet. Otherwise, the troops from Odessa will just go across the bridge and fight on the other side. And as we speak, the Romanians are actually driving some of their troops down now to the border, just in case this happens, and in case that the war actually starts in Moldova. Because my suspicion is that if Transnistrians decide they're going to go into Moldova as opposed to going into Ukraine, that Romania will actually step in and do something. And that, of course, might be what Putin wants, to engage a NATO country. We shall see. Anyway, that is my round robin. The last bit I would just say is that the center of the country is not immune to air attacks, or to rocket attacks, not from air attacks, to rocket attacks, and that there have been 5 attacks on railway lines, which could become more serious if they keep doing this, because a lot of the supply relies upon rail traffic. I think that's me.